Before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Heard, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector. But it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful.
I used to think that there were sheep and there were cows.
Hello and welcome to the On Farm podcast. I am Anna Davis.
I then learned that there were, yows and bullocks and heifers and steers and stots and gimmers and, all these kinds of things.
Today, another lovely chat, actually. I've this year had a hunger for hearing people's inspirational stories, and so we've got another one for you today. I have been chatting to Lynn, who is one half of Lynn and Sandra from Lynbreck Croft. They, as you may know, have featured on television. They've got a book coming out and just got a really interesting story about how they started the Croft 6 years ago and all of the developments and happenings that have taken place since then. So I'm basically going to hand you over to Lynn to tell you her story.
So we're located in the Cairngorm National Park. Our nearest town is Grantown-on-Spey. We're a registered croft, but we're quite a large croft at 150 acres. The main homestead is at about 350 metres above sea level, and we face due south. So that means that we get all the sunshine, but it means that we also get all the prevailing weather. So that makes it an interesting place to farm. We're just a small setup, and we run a range of enterprises here, but our main kind of food production enterprises are, we have a small fold of Highland cattle for beef. We keep rare breed pigs, Oxford Sandy and Blacks. We have pasture hens, and we have lots of bees for making this nice honey production.
Superb introduction, Lynn. Thank you. Presumably, Sandra, who runs the croft with you, is not here because is she outdoors feeding animals, or what's Sandra up to at the moment?
That's exactly why you've got me and not Sandra, because she's the one. I always say that here, Sandra's the one that actually does all the work, and I'm the one that talks about it, because I'm the one that's from. I'm blessed with growing up in Northern Ireland, where the culture is you talk lots. So Sandra's the one that keeps everything running.
I'm sure that you do as well, but I guess in any partnership, it runs better if you've got predefined roles, I suppose. So you've obviously found your niche, each of you. What sort of background do you come from, Lynn? Has farming been in your blood since you were in short trousers, or is it kind of new to you? Tell us a bit about how you got into this.
So we never meant to be farmers. We kind of fell into this way of living, way of life, kind of by accident. So my background is I grew up in Northern Ireland. I went to university and studied archaeology, but I always had this kind of burning passion for the outdoors. I was always really active as a young person. Worked in various jobs for, 10 years or so, and then found myself kind of transitioning into a role with the National Trust as an apprentice ranger. So really kind of taken a big career change in my kind of early 30s. And really that's the kind of trajectory we've been on since. Sandra, similar story, trained as a librarian, so very different. Again, around the same age, got into the apprenticeship with the National Trust for a ranger, and that's where we met. And really it was then that we had this kind of shared vision, shared kind of dream of working the land, of really kind of living much closer to nature, a really kind of idealised dream at that stage. But we were kind of really dedicated towards achieving it. So we kind of quit our jobs. We were working down just outside the edge of London for a National Trust. Moved to Scotland. Sandra is half Scottish. Her mum's from Scotland. So this was the kind of the natural place for us to head to. And after a few years living and working in the borders as tree planters, we were looking for land. Long story short, we found Lynbreck Croft, fell in love with it. Knew we were in trouble because we couldn't actually afford it at the time. But moved moved heaven and earth, and that's where we found ourselves today. And I guess the reason why I say we kind of accidentally came into this way of living and working is because we were looking for somewhere that was maybe about 5 acres. We had a dream of the kitchen garden, we had the dream of the hens. Lynbreck is 150 acres. And so we were put into a position where, you look at the land and you think, so what do we do here? Do we just let it do its own thing and we have our little kitchen garden? Or do we actually see if we can work the land using all the knowledge that we've gained as apprentice rangers with the National Trust about nature and ecology? And that was the decision that we made, to turn Lynbreck into a fully functioning food production, farming with nature, regenerative agriculture hub.
Wow. So you've used some skills that you've picked up over the years working in the National Trust and things like that.
Yeah.
You must have gained an awful lot of skills and learned an awful lot since you started. What kind of springs to mind as having been like kind of the biggest learning journey since you took over the croft?
I mean, I think when we started out on our sort of farming and crofting journey, it was really pretty scary to begin with, because, not only were we having to learn, a whole new kind of base of knowledge, we were having to learn a new language, talking about animals in different ways. I used to think that there were sheep and there were cows. I then learned that there were, yows and bullocks and heifers and steers and stots and gimmers and, all these kinds of things, which really at the start seemed pretty overwhelming. There was that side, which was a huge learning curve. And it was difficult in the early days to feel confident about what we were doing, because we were looking at the land. We didn't really have the background knowledge of farming. We also didn't have any money to invest in what was in effect what I call a semi-derelict agricultural unit. No fences, no sheds, no water supply. There was a private well for the little wooden cabin that we have on site. But so there was really nothing to get started. So what we had to use, and this is really the foundation of the model of the business, was what can we do that's really kind of going to cost the minimum, that we can generate an income from, but really is working in harmony with everything that we already have.
That's one of the questions I'm really keen to understand, actually, and I'm not expecting you to reveal anything confidential. But, if you speak to somebody who perhaps grows several hundred acres of potatoes, or they might have, 1,500 sheep and 800 cattle, it's kind of easier to understand how they make a living because they've got economies of scale.
Sure.
Can you explain, as I say, without giving away anything private, some of the challenges involved with making a living on a croft? Now, I know you're at the big end of crofting, but it must be challenging, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'd love to say that actually we've unlocked the secret to how to make your millions in farming. We have not done that. But we always wanted to be here full time, Anna. So that was always our goal. So there was a number of things that we did really to bring Lynbreck up to speed. This is 6 years on now to where it's a sort of fully working farm, and we're both working here full time. We don't have any kind of off farm salaried jobs, so to speak. So the first thing was, and it was based on a bit of advice that somebody gave us, was work with what you've got. So it was looking at the land that we have and thinking about the context, thinking about the conditions, thinking about the soil type, thinking about the weather systems, and thinking, right, what animals are going to work here for us? Are we going to buy in sort of larger continental breeds that will need housing over the winter? Or are we going to buy in something like a Highlander, which is built for this condition and which has very, very low overheads, particularly at the start? So it was this kind of way of thinking that we used to kind of decide how we would choose the enterprises that we have, the animal enterprises we have. The next thing was, what ones can we set up at relative low cost, but which are going to provide quite a quick return? And the most obvious one was pastured eggs. Okay, so you know yourself, if you've had eggs fresh from a farm, nothing like what you buy in the shop. Like, absolutely, yes. You wonder where they get the ones.
I know. We've got hens at home, so I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
just incredible. I call them little kind of protein bombs of gold. And so what we did was we started to we got a few hens in, started to sell surplus at an honesty box, started to build up trade, got more hens, built that enterprise up, and then started to run it as a subscription club. So we're 5 miles from our nearest town. We didn't have time to spend on sales and marketing because we were trying to set up a business. So we needed to know that our produce was going to go out. We didn't need to think about it. We didn't need to spend hours kind of flogging cheap eggs or flogging them to anybody because we had a glut. We just knew they'd go. So we set up something that was called Egg Club. An egg club's a really simple model whereby people pay up front, and in return they get a box of eggs delivered to their door once a week. The delivery route takes a couple of hours. All the eggs are gone for the week. The money comes into our account in advance. So it's really, really simple, effective setup. And what's nice about it is that we get out every week and talk to our customers, and that's lovely. When we started to sell our meat produce, we started to realise that even though we were sort of, I would say, at the higher end of the cost, pricing of it, because of, the story we were telling about, farming with nature and the work that we were doing, we still really weren't making any money. We were kind of breaking even, but you're looking at it going like, is this right? And it really, really highlights to you the price of food, and you go, blimey, this is frightening. So we started to think, well, how can we add value? Because we could go make one of two decisions here, right, Anna? We could either get more animals, but can our land, truly sustain and, live on the land in a regenerative capacity in a way that we're farming with nature? Or if we get more animals on, are we going to start to tip that balance in the opposite way? So we decided to not go down that route. So we decided to go down a route of adding value to the produce that we had. So a couple of years in, there was an option to apply for an interest-free business loan from a charity called the Organic Research Centre. And actually, I've just seen that they've just released an opportunity for people to apply this year called the Dean Organic Fund. And you can basically apply for a pot of cash, interest-free, 5 years, to do a diversification enterprise. So we applied for that, got it, and put in a small micro butchery on the croft. And what that meant was that we could start to take our produce. I always use the example of like a pork belly, right? You take a pork belly, you cut it into slices, and it's maybe £1 a kilo. You take a pork belly, you cure it and you smoke it, and you sell it as, cured, smoked, streaky bacon. You're maybe getting £5-10 a kilo for it. So you're adding value through a fairly simple process. Now, obviously, there's a learning curve to go with that. But what we started to do was think, well, maybe that's actually the route to go down. So we started another subscription club whereby once a month, people locally, so again, we only sell locally, sign up. They pay a year in advance, and in return they get a little piece of our added value meat once a month. They don't know what they're going to get. They can't say no, they don't want it this month. It's what you see is what you get, but it always comes with a story, and it means that we can be really inventive with our produce, and it means that we can add value to it. It was all these kinds of things that we started to do to really maximise. It was all about, what do we not have to spend money on, and what can we make money on, but in a way in which kind of harmonises with everything that we're kind of doing here. And I would say the other thing, just to kind of continue on that, is the diversification element. So we talk about farming with nature, right? It's a really nice buzzword or phrase or whatever. And, people go, well, what does that mean? And I always say, well, yes, there's the birds and the bees element, but it's also about what your business is built on, the foundation. So nature is inherently diverse. Therefore, our business is inherently diverse. So we sell eggs, we sell beef, we sell added value produce, we sell pork, we sell honey. We then do outreach. So we have people come to visit us. So we do public tours, we do private tours. We've written our own course. We have a private rental on site. We diversify as much as we possibly can. And when you pull all those income streams together, they're all connected. They're all based on food production. Mm-hmm. But when you pull them all together, that is collectively what means that our business pays the bills.
Goodness, and
I guess
a question that I always want to ask everybody involved in farming, but sometimes I'm too nervous to ask the question. Do you have a business plan? Is this structured on a business plan? Because it sounds so organised and so strategic that I'm curious whether you've written it all down as a formal business plan or whether it's all still in your head.
I would say a little bit of all of the above. we kind of hit the ground at the right time when there were grants available, and one of which was the Young Farmers Startup Grant. Now, and that was a €70,000 grant, a phenomenal opportunity for people like us who were genuinely starting out from scratch and needed a bit of a financial capital boost to get in. To qualify for that grant, which was a really competitive grant at the time, we had to write a 5-year business plan. And I really love reading that business plan back. You know, I look at it now and I think, wow, we've changed. But actually the kind of basic principles were all pretty similar. So we did have something there to start off with. That kind of then evolved into, we started to read up about something that was called holistic management, which is a sort of a framework designed by a chap called Alan Savory. And it's not necessarily a framework for farming, it's a framework for business, I would say. You know, there's obviously kind of elements of farming in it, but generally it's a framework for business. And it looks at you, and it looks at you and who you are, what you want out of your life, and then you build out from there. So you look at things like your financial capital, your social capital, your, you know, environmental capital, all that kind of stuff. So we did training in that in 2019, and I think that was a really crucial moment for us to really go, what are we doing here? Where are we going with this? And I'd say that was the kind of the last point at which we really kind of formally tried to sit down and do something. Since then, it's just sort of kind of grown arms and legs. So we should probably sit down again, Anna. Try and pull it all together.
Well, I'm always curious because many people who've been farming since, you know, forever have probably never had an iteration of a business plan, and because you're newer to it, I'm always curious for the answer, and partly because I'm a bit sad and I love a bit of a plan and I love to write things down and know where I'm going, but accepting the fact that things evolve.
Yeah.
So your model is very much selling direct to consumer, which I'm kind of curious about. We've got an episode coming up next week, which is the opposite. It's looking at the supermarket side of things and the volatility within big scale retail. What is it about selling direct to consumer that I guess makes you passionate to keep doing what you do?
I think it's really building that relationship with the people who really support and genuinely care about what it is that you're doing. You know, I'm so conscious of seeing things as they evolve in the farming world and seeing, you know, prices go up and then prices go down and then prices go up and then prices go down. And I think as a business person, if that's kind of how we're going to talk about it in context, I think, gosh, how do you work with that? You know, when you don't know what your prices are going to be, when you don't know kind of what your end value is going to get, how do you financially plan for that? And I guess that's one of the reasons why we decided to go down direct sales, was so that we could be price setters, not price takers. Another was having that social contact. We're really passionate about food, you know, in addition to, or in separate, I guess, to running the farming enterprises, our passion is growing our own foods. We have a massive kitchen garden. We have a polycrub stuffed full of chilies and tomatoes and melons and all sorts of crazy stuff in the summer. But we're so conscious of the impact that food has on our physical and mental well-being. So the fact that we can then share additional food that we produce with people in our local community we just get such a buzz out of it. And I think a third reason as to selling direct to the consumer is because we're only small scale, right? We have to maximize every single penny. So if I'm selling to a customer via a shop, I'm maybe selling at 50% of what's actually the end value that's being sold. Because we're so small, we can't afford to lose that 50%. So we're balancing up not just the financial elements, but we're also balancing up things like, you know, our time, you know, I mean, okay, so we're selling it at more, but I'm having to spend 2 hours of every week going out and delivering eggs. Does that actually quantify? And I would say, well, yes, it does, because we don't look at everything purely in terms of monetary value. We look at it in terms of, you know, enjoyment, you know, contributing to the community, contributing to other people's. There's so much more in that you can quantify. That's not just, you know, zeros after a pound sign.
Yeah, and I think actually that's true across the board, regardless of who farmers are selling to. If they purely did it because of the money, half of them wouldn't be doing it. You know, we do it because it's a love, it's a life, it's a passion. Yeah. But I think at the same time, your attitude is fantastic, and perhaps somewhat refreshing in that you're taking into account your time as well, and you are doing the maths to make sure things stack up. Am I better off to sell honey or eggs based on how much effort and time I've got to put into that? So I think that's really interesting, and I think many people could take a leaf out of your book. And actually, that was a completely unintentional segue there.
Nice, Anna. I see what you did there. You've done this before. It's very good.
If only I was that clever. It was totally accidental. Your book. Now, you mentioned earlier that Sandra, your partner, used to be a librarian. So does that mean that she penned the majority of the book that the two of you have just written, or was it very much a joint exercise? Because I'd love to talk about this book, and perhaps you could start by giving us the name of it and then tell us a bit about how it came about.
So the name is Our Wild Farming Life, believe it or not. Really, the story started back in summer, I'm trying to think what year we're in, 2022. So I think it was summer 2020. So it was the first summer of the pandemic, basically, when we were all going, what's going on?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was a summer when all of us were kind of, we'd really kind of had foundations shaking. I think everybody, no matter what field you worked in or what area, you kind of lived in. And we found ourselves having a very quiet summer because all of our kind of diversification stuff, tours, courses, that was all cancelled. So it was just us kind of, doing all the food production side of things. And this email dropped in saying, hey, would you be interested in writing a book? And it was from a publishing company called Chelsea Green, who used to be based in America, but they're now kind of got an office in the UK too. And they're a publishing company who we knew about because they produce lots of really awesome books on regenerative farming and things like permaculture and kitchen gardening and all that kind of stuff. So we had loads of their books anyway. So we sort of said, well, okay, and sent a few sample pieces of writing, and a couple of months later they basically said, look, we're going to offer you a contract. So we started writing in about October. The irony is as much as I am the talker, I'm also the writer. So I penned the sort of the first draft, and then I would get up at like 5 o'clock every morning over the winter.
Goodness.
I'd write. Then we'd spend all day out doing farm work because we had a really, really cold winter last year, so it was really busy. And then the evenings Sandra would spend editing. So that was basically our kind of life for about 6 months. And it's really a sort of an honest story about our journey into how we came here and how we ended up doing what we were doing. And I think what was really fun about it, I sort of describe writing the book as it was almost like therapy, in that you're kind of working through everything and you're going, right, where did we start and where are we now? And gosh, look at what's happened. And it's sharing. I think we're quite honest in the book. At the start we felt like all this knowledge that we didn't have was a real downside. We felt unconfident, we felt nervous, we felt anxious. Really, actually, now on reflection, we think maybe it was one of our strengths, because we came into this completely fresh. We had no preconceived ideas as to what it should look like. All we knew was we've got this, we've got this amount of money to spend, we've got this to do, what can we do with it? And so that's really the whole story, how it all kind of felt, how it all sort of came together. And we talk about honestly about things like the first time we had calving and what that looked like, but we try and I guess explain it in a way that someone who's in farming will go, oh yeah, I can relate to that. But then actually somebody maybe who's in a flat in London can go, oh, okay, I can relate to that. It's kind of trying to be a bit of a gateway book, because the whole reason why we do what we do, we do a lot of social media and we do a lot of kind of outward facing stuff. It's because we're so passionate about building bridges between people and where their food comes from. And we do it one way, and that's one way. There are hundreds of ways of doing it, but it's about saying to people, look, ask the questions, who's in your local community, who's producing what, go and speak to them, talk to them, see if you can buy from them, really support food production on your doorstep, because there is nothing that is more valuable in this world.
So true. You mentioned earlier, obviously because of the way in which you produce it, your food is perhaps, or certainly the meat anyway, is perhaps at the higher end of the sort of cost bracket. Have you ever had anybody say to you, oh, that's too expensive, or no, not for me? Or do you think they understand the connection between the way in which these animals are reared and the associated cost implications, I suppose?
So it's a real frustration for us that our produce is what would be viewed as being more expensive, because actually I would just say that it's more aligned to what it actually costs to produce.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the first thing. I think the people who buy from us see that, and the reason they see that is because we really share that story a lot. We share it a lot. We say to people that buy our produce, if you want to come anytime, and if you want to see the animals, if you want to see what they're fed, if you want to see any of that, you can come and we can have that conversation. So that kind of direct transparency, honesty, and they know us as well, I think means that they trust that the value that we charge is viable and valid and honest. You could even argue it's not expensive enough, but that's a whole other conversation to have, I mean, because I guess our barometer of what food should cost is so low, it's really difficult to sort of explain that to people, but it does really frustrate us, because what we don't want is that our produce is exclusive for people that earn lots of money, but
Yes.
we're that rock in between the hard places, so we're going, right, we're trying to make some money here, so we have to pay the bills. We're not looking to earn loads of profit. We're not squirreling away loads of wealth. We just want to live a good life and pay the bills. That's all we want to do.
Yeah.
So you've got that element, but then you've got this other element of people who are on low incomes, fact, who aren't able to afford this produce, fact, and we would desperately want to get it to them, fact. So how do we get there? And that's when you have to start to think bigger picture. The problems and the issues that we have are so vast as a society that all we can each do individually is have those honest conversations and do as much as we can and just keep chipping away at it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, and I'm sure it's fundamental actually to your marketing, is your story. It's all about authenticity and everything behind your story, and you're obviously very good at telling that story because you've developed a really strong social media following and engagement.
Thank you.
For anybody listening who is kind of envious, I don't know, I look at Instagram all the time, and whether it's kitchen floors or whether it's kitchen gardens, I feel kind of envious, and I wish I didn't, but I did. So anybody who kind of looks at these things and feels envious, have you got any tips for them in terms of how they can kind of improve upon their own social media?
So I think that the strength that all of us have, so especially if you're like, say, in an individual business setup like we are, the strength that all of us have is that there's no two of us, right? So there's no two Lynbreck Crofts. There's no two Lynn and Sandras. There's only one Lynbreck Croft and there's only one Lynn and Sandra. Therefore, straight away, we are completely 100% unique. So we've got that. We've identified that. So therefore, we now have to think, what are our strengths? What are our strengths in this unique setup? So, here, for example, we have a beautiful view. We have this incredible vista. So we put up a lot of, pictures of the view. But what we try to do is, rather than just do the kind of classic Instagram, look at this, isn't this so pretty? Isn't it all so perfect? We always try and put up some kind of bit of information in there as well. So we'll have like a beautiful view with, say, some Highland cattle in the foreground. I mean, that's kind of like iconically Scottish. But maybe we'll tell a little bit of a story in that thread about, this is the work the cattle do. They do sort of particular regenerative grazing and, nothing kind of really boring and dry. At least we try not to make it that way. But we try to make it educational as well, so that we're constantly engaging people with what we're doing. Either farmers who are looking to change things, for example, or just general Joe public who don't know anything, about farming whatsoever. So you're taking your uniqueness, and then you're taking your strengths, and then you're combining the two. And the other thing that we always try to do is vary the content. So really simple tip, like if we do a post one day on Highland cattle, then the next day it might be on the pigs. Then the next day it might be on produce that we've done. Then the next day it might be on the book. Then, so it's always thinking, mix it up a little bit, keep it kind of varied. It's really difficult though. I mean, we've had times on social media when, people say things and you feel like you've kind of just had a bit of a blow, if somebody's not very nice. It's very rare, I have to say. For us, it's been very rare. But there is the odd time, and it's just, I don't know why, but we're all human. You can have 99 people say, you're doing a great job, and then you can have one who goes, I don't like you. And then you think about that one for like the rest of the week, Yeah. So you are putting yourself out there. But I think what you just have to do is using your uniqueness, using your strengths, you then build your online community. And the online community, I really feel, are your support network, are your safety network, so that if there is a negative comment, you really know that it is the exception rather than the rule. And quite often, the rest of them will come in and kind of give you a big squeeze.
Yeah.
So to speak.
How different would it be if you were trying to run your business without social media? If social media didn't exist, if we were still in a non-digital age, what would be different, do you think?
Gosh, carrier pigeons. We'd have a Ducat. So I don't know. I mean, in some ways, the core of our business, Anna, the absolute core is producing food for ourselves and people in the community. That's it, so I think the core of it wouldn't actually change, because we don't need lots of social media to continue to engage with them, because they're all local. I mean, obviously I say that and I'm saying to myself, yeah, but it did help because that's how you got local people engaged and blah, blah, blah. But the fact is that we are, about food production locally. And so therefore, I think the core of it wouldn't change. I think what's really helped, and certainly also from the additional income side of view, is the diversification element. And that's when the social media really does kick in, because, we'll have people, say come on a croft tour that, we do once a month, it's £15. It's not loads of money for people to come, but people will come from the south of England, just to come on a croft tour. Yeah. And that's when they've found us by social media. So that diversification element is when the social media really does kind of come into play.
Yeah,
I would say.
And we haven't really mentioned it yet, actually, because we've been talking about so many other amazing things. But we spoke last week to the couple from Farm Ness, who are part of this current series of This Farming Life.
Okay, yeah.
And I know that you and Sandra were on This Farming Life as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did being on telly sort of change your business, or even you as individuals?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I mean, Farming Life, we were in Farming Life in 2018. And really, I look back and I just think, I can't believe we did that, because it was our very first year of really getting the business going. Like, I'm not joking you, it was the very first year. It was the first time we were having cattle on the land. It was the first time we were taking our pigs to our abattoir. It was the first time we were selling our produce. It was, the first time we were doing so many things. And I mean, I remember thinking, like, this is absolutely kind of exciting, but this is utterly terrifying, and we were really raw on it, really raw. But what a phenomenal experience. Again, the reason why we did it was because we thought, there's so many people nowadays, especially nowadays, that want to go back to the land, that want to get into, even if it's just small scale farming or small holding or whatever. And we really wanted to show people what it looks like. And we also wanted then to bring in our passion and our backgrounds, which was, in kind of nature and ecology, and sort of show how the two, so this kind of like complete newbiness and complete newbie to running a business as well. We've both only ever had salaried jobs before. So this total kind of complete newbiness connected with getting into farming for the first time, and then, a film camera following us the entire time. It was... I do think, wow, I still can't believe we did that. But it was incredible. And, so many people then get in touch afterwards and say, I saw you on Farming Life. And, I loved your story or whatever. And I learned a lot about this, that and the other. And you just think, do you know what? That's great. If it's sharing a really positive message, and it means that people are getting more engaged in farming and crofting, then that's absolutely brilliant, because that's exactly what we need at the minute.
Yeah. You mentioned there, actually, you've done the segue for me this time. Farming and...
We're a great tag team here.
Oh, we just, yeah. You can be a guest every week because it's easy. You mentioned farming and crofting. Now we know we don't necessarily need to start going into the law here, but we know that the system of legal ownership of land is different for crofting than it is for farming. But from your experience, is there a clear definition in terms of what you're doing every day? How do you view the kind of crofting and farming differential, if even you experience one?
I love this question. This is brilliant. We sort of talk about it a little bit in our book, because we call ourselves farmers, crofters, growers, producers. We use lots of different terms, because I see that we're kind of part of all of that, which is, in effect, food production. We love that we're a croft. And initially when we were looking at the kind of, I guess now on reflection, it was the marketing elements, and we were making our little logo, we were like, the word croft has to be in there. That has to be in there, because we love what crofting is. We love the cultural heritage of crofting. We're super proud. We feel like, I'm from Ireland, Sandra's, half Scottish, half Swiss. We feel super proud that we can move to a country where neither of us grew up, and just by the very land that we've bought, become part of a culture that's been, around for a very, very, very long time. And I think not only do we feel very proud, we feel very humbled about that, because, the cultural heritage of crofting is one of where, you're grafting, you're maximising everything that you have, and you are drawing from income in lots of different ways. And generally it's on land which is really, really hard to farm, really hard to farm. So we are so proud of the crofting heritage and the crofting element. Equally, we farm, we produce food, we don't do it on a big scale, but, it's not how big it is, it's what you do with it that counts, so to speak. And so I think we're just a beautiful marriage of the two. We are just this wonderful fusion of the cultural elements of crofting, but all the practical elements of farming, and kind of you mish them all together, and that's us at Lynbreck.
Yeah. And having been very conscious of putting the word croft into your logo and your marketing, do you think it has a bearing on the views of your customers and the way that they perceive you?
I think where it does make an impact is actually, I feel sometimes in the farming community, where people go, oh, well, you're just a little croft. Oh, well, you're just a little croft. And you think, hold on a minute, crofting is phenomenal. The principles of crofting are so widespread and they're so fundamental that I'm really proud to be a croft, and I'm really proud of what, we would be doing if it was 5 acres or 150 acres. Yeah. And I think really it's an interesting mindset to explore. And I guess especially in Scotland, because most farm holdings, if you're, not a croft, but a farm, are much, 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 much bigger than ours. But yet we're still all doing the same job. We're just doing it on completely different scales. I do believe that, somebody might be making more food than we are, but if you look at all the land in Scotland and all the potential of producing food in Scotland, well, hey, if it's on 1 acre or 1,000 acres, we're all kind of moving towards the same goal. So, we're part of a team. Yeah.
So, the whole sector is part of a team, really. And I think that everybody would do well to remember that we're all on the same side, because sometimes people forget. So if I really hope that you've got better things to do, but if you and Sandra were to sit down this weekend and write the next iteration of your business plan, what would it be saying about the next 6 years at Lynbreck Croft and the future?
It's another good question, Anna. I think it's taken us 6 years to get to the point where we're really starting to understand our enterprises, but also starting to understand what it is that we're wanting to get out of this, how it is that we're enjoying things. And I think that's bringing in the whole quality of life element, isn't it? We all know, particularly in farming, mental health is becoming a really big conversation point, and rightly so. And I think, we all choose to be in farming, not to make money, but because it's a quality of life. Yet for some reason in the industry, we're kind of not doing either particularly well at the minute. Yeah. So we really value more and more just, the kind of the health and happiness side. And I think we've had this huge kind of mad journey in the last 6 years. It's been a sprint, and we're now kind of going, okay, where are we at? We love producing food. We love growing our own food. And what we're actually starting to do is trying to look at ways in which we can actually increase the amount of food that we produce at Lynbreck, but not compromise on those goals that I was talking about earlier. So one of the projects that we're hoping to start this winter is starting to integrate fruit trees into our field systems. It'll be a very slow project, but starting to integrate fruit trees so that the animals will graze around them. We'll not lose any grazing. But what we'll start to do is slowly build it in every year. Fruit trees, nut trees, so things like hazel, which grow really well in this area. Really selecting the crops that will thrive, at our altitude and our exposure, and planning for the long term. And I think that's a thing that we do quite a lot. A lot of what we do, we'll never see the fruit of, for want of a better pun, but we're always thinking about the future and thinking, what are we going to hand Lynbreck on in 20, 30, 40 years time? How about we hand it over with this incredible food production landscape that's bursting at the seams of abundance? So we really want to continue along that route, and I think we also want to keep with the outreach side of things, so keep having the conversation with people, because we're conscious that we have a bit of a profile and we want to use that in a positive way. Equally, we always say Lynbreck is our home, so we want to keep, so we always want to get that balance. So I think honestly, we're at a kind of in some way we're at a point of transition, but equally at the same time, we're kind of just going on the same path that we started out, but just always making sure that we're enjoying life. It's nice to live here, and we live in the most incredible part of Scotland. I'm sorry if anybody thinks that they do, but we do. It's so nice, it's so lovely. We're so grateful for everything that we've got. If we can continue living like that, if we can continue paying the bills and just kind of sharing a positive message, then that's all that we would ever want for the rest of our lives, I would say.
Thank you again to Lynn. Sandra, if you're listening, sorry we didn't get a chance to chat to you, but I will kind of hear you, hopefully, when I read your book. And it's been really great and really interesting. And I, as I say, I love stories like this. So that's it for today. Please do join us next week. Monty, as I said, is back next week with a panel discussion, actually. Agri-Scot should have taken place, or delayed Agri-Scot should have taken place this month, February, but as we know, it hasn't. And every year at Agri-Scot, there is a panel discussion upstairs, which always packs the place out. That's standing room only. So we've kind of tried to recreate that on a podcast, and we've got a panel discussion looking at, a host of things really: market volatility, dealing with the supermarkets, finding a market, and basically just kind of dealing with all of the uncertainties that the sector is facing at the moment. So we've got some really good panellists, including but not limited to Rory Christie, who you've heard from before, and Marion McCormick, who used to be in charge of marketing for Aldi. So some really interesting stuff going on there, and so please do listen next week. As you know, the On Farm podcast is brought to you by Scene&HerdPR and Marketing, so please do look us up if you need any help. And we've got more news coming for you in the next couple of weeks about some online training that will be available for you if you're looking to upskill in a host of areas, ranging from Facebook and Instagram to mental health training to conducting appraisals with your staff, a whole host of different topics. So keep your ears open for when we give you more information about that in future. But meantime, thank you again for listening, and please do spread the word about the podcast amongst your friends and family. Bye for now.